Hey, so welcome to the Wild Gut Project. My name is Carrie and today I'm going to be giving you an overview of the low FODMAP diet. So, the low FODMAP diet is essentially an elimination diet where you cut down the levels of FODMAPs, which is a very specific group of carbohydrates, from your diet to a really low level. For a short while, then you kind of test each particular carbohydrate and work out which ones are triggering your IBS. So this research comes from the University Monash in Australia, and what they found is that when people with IBS significantly cut down the amount of FODMAPs in their diet, so those carbohydrates, around 75 to 81% of them actually experienced relief from their symptoms, so either down to a very manageable, acceptable level or completely free of them, which is fantastic. So FODMAP is actually the acronym used to describe these carbohydrates. It actually stands for Fermentable, Oligosaccharides, Disaccharides, Mono-saccharides And Polyols. I'll definitely go into more detail on each one of those because they all kind of work in slightly different ways. It's quite interesting, I think. But essentially, a low FODMAP diet is one that's low in those particular carbohydrates. FODMAPs are found primarily in plants and also in dairy. So apart from that dairy thing, it does make it kind of extra tricky for vegans because obviously all you're eating is plants, so if there's lots of FODMAPs in plants, it kind of cuts out your options a bit more. Let's go a little bit more in depth into each of those particular FODMAPs. First up, oligosaccharides. This is actually a slightly more complicated one because it involves two carbohydrates. Number one within the oligosaccharide family is galacto-oligosaccharide. And these are found primarily in beans and lentils. Sometimes you'll see it denoted as GOS or GOS. And then the second half of this family within oligosaccharides is fructans, also sometimes denoted as FOS. So this is actually like the big one. It's found in certain vegetables and fruit. It's found in nuts, it's found in seeds, it's found in wheat. So this is the one that you'll find in onion and garlic, and actually that's a really common intolerance for a lot of people, so it's a tricky one for your system. Right, on to the disaccharides. Di, 2, saccharide, sugar, 2 sugars. This is actually just referring to lactose, so as vegans we don't have to worry about that. We're not eating lactose unless we're like an actual baby having it from a human. It's a bit weird to suckle a cow, so don't have to worry about that. Monosaccharides. This is actually referring to fructose. And this is actually quite an interesting one because it's not fructose in itself, is where the ratio of fructose to glucose is kind of off. So there's a lot more fructose than glucose, which means it's certain fruits, it's dried fruits and certain vegetables where the ratio you find within them is way over to the fructose side. It also means that processed foods can be quite tricky because the kind of widespread use of high fructose corn syrup is obviously, a big thing in processed food. I think especially in America because obviously corn crops are heavily subsidised. But it's one to look out for, and generally I think probably in general like vegan food and low FODMAP processed food is always going to be an issue also for the next one. The next one being polyols, and this is a group of alcohol sugars. So by alcohol I mean an oxygen-hydrogen group, not like, getting drunk alcohol. These are found in certain fruits, and they're also found in certain vegetables. So for example would be prunes, and they're also really common as artificial sweeteners. So mannitol and sorbitol are examples of polyols, and you will find those in a lot of kind of low sugar drinks and sweets and processed food. Processed food is a tricky one with FODMAPs. I think it's a topic for some more videos, but it's quite interesting to know which foods are high in which particular FODMAPs, just because it makes combining a bit easier and you won't overload in one particular type of FODMAP unintentionally. Now, you might be wondering, how do these carbohydrates that are found in all these foods actually cause IBS? Well, there is a kind of a theory behind the pathology, and I'll go into it now. So these short-chain carbohydrates are kind of a problem for two reasons. The first is that they are poorly absorbed, if at all. So some people actually have an intolerance where they don't absorb it at all. You might have heard malabsorption being thrown around, and that just means that in the small intestine it doesn't go through the intestinal wall into your bloodstream and get sort of processed that way. it hangs around, which means that if you think back to your school days, these sugars are hydrophilic. Water molecules attract to them, so they kind of have an osmotic pressure. Water from, so if you imagine there's lots of sugars in your intestine, it kind of changes the concentration of water outside than in, so water molecules are drawn into that area of the high concentration of sugar to try and even that out. Osmosis. Which means essentially you've just got lots of water in your intestine, it's swelling a bit, and that is what diarrhea is. It's an excess water being drawn into your intestines. So after being poorly absorbed, you know, they're hanging around, they move along into your large intestine, and that's where the F in FODMAP comes into play, so fermentable. So imagine fermentable foods like sauerkraut and beer, they start to get a bit gassy, and that's because the bacteria start digesting or metabolizing those sugars, and a byproduct of that is gas. So carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen all kind of get produced as a part of that process. And within the kind of contained space of your intestine with excess water and the gas, it starts to kind of swell. And that's why you'll see your stomach swelling. And that also then stretches the intestinal wall. And the nerves obviously will pick up on that. Your body's keeping an eye on what's going on in your intestines. So part of the theory might be that that swelling is something you're particularly sensitive to if you have IBS. Also that there's some kind of issue with the signalling between the nerves in your brain. You might then get more cramping as a result of that stretching. And it could just be that actually excessive stretching is painful. So those are kind of two reasons you'll be getting cramps. Obviously then you're swollen. That obviously gas has to go somewhere, hence the kind of excess flatulence, and then yeah. That's your diarrhea and your flatulence and your bloating and your abdominal cramps kind of explained. With the constipation one, it's a bit different. It can also lead to food moving really slowly along your gut, which means water then gets drawn out if it's there for too long, and that can lead to kind of, yeah, the constipation. But do we all react the same way to FODMAPs? Well, simple answer is no. Everyone has slightly different sensitivities and tolerances to different FODMAPs. So you could be absolutely fine with polyols, but galacto-oligosaccharides are like your kryptonite and they're the worst thing ever. Also combinations, so you might be fine with a bit of polyols, you might be fine with a bit of galacto-oligosaccharides, but together it's just, you know, a nightmare and you get a big flare up. Well, very clearly the big benefit of the low FODMAP diet is it gives you that information, that self-knowledge to eat in like kind of the best way you can. It's a short-term diet, it's not forever. It's really just so you can understand what you can eat and still feel healthy. Now let's go into a little bit more information about how the diet actually works. So, it comes in 3 phases. The first one is the elimination phase, and this is kind of 2 to 6 weeks of eating completely low FODMAP. So it's kind of the hardest one. It's very steep learning curve because you have to rethink how you do your food and you have to be really careful. The goal is to essentially get your symptoms down to either an acceptably low level or away completely. Once you have that acceptable kind of low base level of symptoms, you know, you're feeling okay, you can then move on to the challenge phase. And this is where you will test each particular FODMAP individually. So within each of those kind of 4 groups that I listed, obviously there's different types of sugars in between and you actually have to test each one individually. So for example, with the oligosaccharides, you would be testing fructones 1 week and galacto-oligosaccharides the next week. You do this by first having a kind of clear out, so you're strict low FODMAP, you have no symptoms, you don't have any like kind of high amounts in your body. So on the first day you have a small amount of one particular food that contains that particular FODMAP. So you feel okay, you move on to the second day, you have a medium portion, and then if you're still okay, on the third day you have a large portion. This way you kind of have a sensitivity scale and you can see at which point you become sensitive. So it might be that you're okay with a small amount and you're just about okay with a medium size, but you're not great with a large. But actually a lot of the time a large is quite practically a large portion, so it's almost not an issue for you because you'll never eat that much anyway. So you do that for each FODMAP. For non-vegans, if you're eating dairy, that's 10 weeks. 10 weeks of challenges worth. And then if you are vegan, big plus, you're done in 9 weeks. Yay! That's a pro! Right, so the third phase is the reintroduction phase. So you take all that information from your challenges, you have an idea about your sensitivities, what you can eat, and then you can slowly start reintroducing foods that you know you're not sensitive to. And then you can also start testing different combinations. So it's really, really worth keeping a diary, making a note of what things you're combining. And essentially you'll find a modified low FODMAP diet that allows you to eat kind of as close to a normal diet as possible, but within the kind of limits that won't set off your triggers. Oh, it's sunny now. So as I said, this is a short-term elimination diet to just work out exactly what's triggering you. It's not forever. It's not a diet to lose weight. It's not a lifestyle diet or anything like that. It's purely just to work out what's making you sick. So this diet is, it's for IBS. I think it does well for people with Crohn's, with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, with some inflammatory bowel conditions. People with celiacs also respond quite well to it. So think of it as kind of a medical treatment almost, obviously without side effects. It's not forever, and it's not like a diet. It's, yeah, self-knowledge. I'd love to know if you guys have any questions. I've been really, really loving all the questions people have asking and comments everyone's been making on my video so far. Like, it's made me so happy. It's really, really cool, and I really appreciate it. So if you have any more questions, comment down below, like this video, subscribe. Yeah, it's been really, really awesome hearing from you guys. I hope this one was helpful, maybe cleared up some things and just gave a good overview. Yeah. See you in my next video. Bye.